Can I have a motion to reconvene the public meeting at 7:42 p.m.?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So we have board announcements. Are there any board announcements at this point, or do we want to go right to the superintendent's report?
Lonnie, we had a audit committee and finance council this week, and we're actually going to be talking about the financial statement report later today.
We're going to do the board discussion after the superintendent's reports and do the committee reports then.
Perfect.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Pritchett for his superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm in my mask, so I just wanted to make sure of that. So I'll try my best to speak clearly. Well, this evening we've got a few topics on our agenda under the superintendent's report. I am going to turn it over in a moment to Mark Levy of Nugent and Hauser. I think Mark is here. Mark, are you on?
I'm waiting for Mark to come on.
No. I'm going to change the report a little bit, and I did mention in last week's, maybe it was the week prior, weekly Board of Education report regarding some of the work that was done with some of our community partners to ensure that we were able to stand up an appropriate number of staff this year. And one of the challenges we faced was centered on childcare for staff. And we understood some of the issues associated with providing childcare for our staff who are public employees. And we know that throughout the COVID crisis, that essential workers under executive order from the governor have had that opportunity, that those resources had been provided as part of the governor's executive order. But one of the things that we hadn't considered was, how do we provide childcare for our teachers who by law were able to take leave for childcare, but also do it in a way that did not impact on our taxpayers. Quite a difficult challenge, to put it mildly. So through some very clever problem solving, and I'll acknowledge Dr. Karen Tessick, along with some partnerships that we've enjoyed over the years with some of our local not-for-profits and community servants, we were able to come up with a plan to be able to do just that, while also providing some valuable experience for some of our friends over at St. Thomas Aquinas who were going through teacher preparation programs as well. So the Blauvelt Sons of Italy were, generously allowed us to use their facility. Our friends at STAC provided us with the volunteers that we needed to provide supervision. And we do, obviously, I got to herald to Karen Tessick and AJ Walker again for their part in coordinating all this effort. But I do have a couple of certificates that I just would like to read into the public record to recognize the efforts of those folks that really came through in the clutch. So our first individual that I would like to recognize is, or individuals are the Blauvelt Sons of Italy. Now there's a few folks obviously that are part of that organization who did a fine job. Certainly their executive committee agreed unanimously to allow us to undertake this project. So certainly I'm very grateful to all of them, but also to Mr. Robert Ciparino, who really served as our point of contact in this and helped us sort of brainstorm and troubleshoot this. So I just want to recognize them and thank them because it would have been very difficult to open this year had we not had that space. Also to our friends at St. Thomas Aquinas College for their contribution to the program. Again, we have a few folks over there who are providing supervision and keeping our youngsters very actively engaged and productive while they're on their off weeks. And we're also providing that some of our students in that program come from other districts in the county as well, because again, this is a service for our teachers and some of those teachers who are parents of children who attend other school districts. Although most of the students that are in the program are ours. And then lastly, of course, a debt of gratitude to our ESO members of ESO for their contributions in making this happen as well. I know that they've actually, they've worked very closely with the Sons of Italy because they're going to compensate them in some small way, or not in a way that I think is, certainly reimburses the Blauvelt Sons of Italy, because we want to make them whole as well. So ESO really has, held up their end of this as well, and we really appreciate their hard work and dedication in making sure that we had a great opening this year, which I'm proud to say that they did. So again, I just want to thank those three groups of folks. We'll make sure that they get their these certificates in the next day or so. But again, I wanted to formally congratulate them and thank them for their contribution in helping us solve what I consider to be a very tricky problem, which actually turned out to be a very valuable experience for all those who are involved. Another item that I just very quickly mention, typically in our regular board meetings, this is one, we have a PTA report or we have a student presentation. Because of COVID, the student presentation piece has been a little bit tricky. I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to be able to do that in a safe manner as possible, just not tonight. And also our PTA report. I'm actually going to meet with our PTA Executive Council next Monday, and I will let them know that we're going to get back into a cycle where we'll be preparing a PTA report to kind of give us an update at the board meeting. We don't have that ready for this evening because we haven't met yet, but next week I'll make sure that they know that you're certainly welcome to provide us with that very valuable input and feedback that helps guide the work that we do here as a Board of Education. So those are the two items that I wanted to address specifically before we get into some of the financial and capital projects updates. So, Mr. Coster, what I'd like to do now is, because I think you're keeping an eye on who our attendees are, so, I'll let you go ahead and determine the order of who's presenting next.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pritchard, and good evening, everyone. I see that Mr. Levy, as well as our capital project team, is now online with us. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. So to begin with, Mr. Levy, you have the honor of going first and reporting out to our Board of Education on our 2019-2020 fiscal audit and financial statement preparation. So with that, I'd like to welcome you and have you provide your report to the Board of Education.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. We met with the audit committee prior to this evening and went through the audit report in much greater detail. Tonight, I will be brief, but I will still try to summarize the results of this year's audit for you this evening. Please, if there's any questions as I go through it, you can stop me and ask questions as I'm going through the presentation this evening. Basically, the audit consists of three main sections. We do an audit of the financial statements. We do an audit of the federal awards in accordance with uniform guidance, which is basically your single audit because the district expends over $750,000 in federal awards. And we also did an audit of the extra classroom activity funds. So we give three different opinions on each of these areas, or one opinion for each of the three areas. And I'm happy to report that the district received unqualified or clean opinions in every area. So that's good. So we'd be required to modify the opinion if we felt that the financial statements were not being fairly presented in accordance with our accounting standards. But I'm happy to say again that the district did receive clean opinions for all those different areas that I just mentioned. Okay, included in the audit report though is also a report on internal controls of the district. And in accordance with government auditing standards, we're required to look at the controls of the district to see if they're being implemented properly, what controls are being implemented, and are they operating effectively? Okay, and in accordance with the auditing standards, we're required to review those controls. And again, it helps us plan our audit. We can't plan our audit properly if we don't review the controls. But then once we get to review the controls, we're required to assess what controls the district has implemented and whether they're operating effectively, as I said, but and report to you any deficiencies if there were any. And basically the report, I won't go through all the language, but it kind of puts we're required to review deficiencies into three areas. The basic is just called, the basic category is just called a deficiency. So it's when the controls are not operating properly to prevent misstatements from occurring. Okay, that's just a basic deficiency. The worst scenario would be if the district had a material weakness. And material weakness is basically a paraphrase, but it's where there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement in the financial statements will not be presented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. And then in between those two, something's called a significant deficiency, and that's just less severe than a material weakness, but still important enough to warrant your attention, and we would have to mention it to management and the board. And I'm happy to say that after reviewing all the internal controls of the district, they appear to be implemented properly. We did not note any internal controls that were not operating effectively, nor any material weaknesses that we had to mention and report to the board. So again, we don't opine on that, but it's just it's a different type of report. But we are required to mention the deficiencies as noted, and we did not note anything that needed to be brought to the board's or management's attention. So that's a good thing. I'll keep going if there's no questions. The general fund, so I'll talk about the fund statements. So we have two kinds of statements in here besides, well, three. You have your fund statements, which are on the modified accrual basis, that the funds that the district keeps on a daily basis. So your general fund, your capital fund, your school lunch, special aid, so forth. The debt service, I can mention them all. Then there's the district-wide statements that are on the full accrual basis. Okay, that's where we bring your non-current assets and your long-term liabilities in. Okay, and then there's also the extra class of activity funds. They're on the cash basis of accounting. So there's three different bases of accounting going on in this one statement or one audit report. So I'll just talk about real briefly in the fund statements, as I mentioned, the ones that are kept on a daily basis by the district. So the general fund is in good shape. The fund ended with, at the end of the year, June 30th, the assets were about 4 times greater than the liabilities of the fund, which is great. The fund balance for the year increased by about $6 million, and it ended with the year with about $28.2 million in fund balance. Of the $28.2 million, about $24 million was in reserves, and the reserves that the district utilized or had funded as of June 30th were the capital reserve, the tax cert reserve, your employment benefit reserve, unemployment insurance reserve, and the teacher retirement reserve. Okay, so general fund's in very good shape. The reserves appear to be adequately funded. The fund balance, the unassigned fund balance at the end of the year was about $3.9 million. And that was in accordance with the 4% fund balance law. So you're right on the money there. So that's perfect. So you're in accordance with the laws of the state of New York for school districts. Anything else? So the general fund expenditures were all in accordance with the budgets that were approved by the taxpayers, which is very important. You want to have good fiscal management, and you want to make sure that you're spending in accordance with that budget. And so happy to report the district did a fine job there. All the funds of the district, as I mentioned before, there's the other funds besides the general fund would be your capital fund, your school lunch fund, special aid fund, debt service fund. They all had positive fund balances and were being run in accordance with state regulations. So that's all good. Next is I'll just talk briefly about the district has to go from the fund statements, which I mentioned on a modified accrual, to the full accrual statements and everything is combined together in what's called the district-wide financial statements. Okay, the district-wide financial statements, so we don't show individual funds, it's just one whole statement for the entire district. The net position for the year decreased by about $11.5 million, and with ending a result of a deficit of, hold on, I'm just flipping, sorry, of about $113 million. That sounds like a terrible number. Every district that we deal with has a negative deficit position for the full accrual statements, mostly because, as I mentioned to the audit committee and to management of the district, the other post-employment benefits. That's an actuarial determined liability that every school district has to have done every year, and the actuary makes certain assumptions. This year, and I'm not blaming the actuary, it's just the fact of what happened. This year, with the actuarial assumptions, the discount rate got reduced by the district by just over 1%, and the mortality tables changed. So the accumulation of these different actuarial calculations caused the liability to go up by like $60 million or more, and the expense actually increased by about $14 million on the full accrual method of accounting. Okay, so that's, if you didn't have this OPEB liability, you wouldn't have such a deficit position. You probably wouldn't have a deficit position, to be honest with you. So I'm just pointing that out. Other than that, the district, everything was done great. Basically, I don't know, I'll be happy to take questions, but I'd like to thank the district for the courtesies that were extended to us during the audit. It was an interesting year, obviously, with the pandemic. We, the district and our firm were kind of unsure how the audit would go. We didn't know if we were going to do a remote audit, in person, and just the district, I'm sure, had a lot of obstacles just to get the work done timely, given the pandemic. I'd like to just say, the district should be commended. Alicia, Cleo, and the rest of the business department should be commended for a job well done. I thought the audit, considering all in all, went pretty smoothly this year. So, that was good for us and good for you. So, job well done. So, I'm happy. That was quick. If you have questions for me, I'd be more than happy to address them. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. You had mentioned in the internal controls that everything was done properly, but you also said that you would also provide any recommendations. So were there any additional recommendations that were made?
No, we didn't really find that recommendations that we had to change. Like we when we review the controls of the district, if we find that things aren't being implemented or things aren't being properly run, we will give the recommendations. But we didn't feel that there was really recommendations that needed to be made this year.
And then the second question I had was regarding those deficits, and you had stated that was based on actuarial tables and so forth, and some of the assumptions now have changed. So it is a very daunting number. Where does that number kind of fit in other districts that are seeing the same type of actuarial tables? I mean, is it a concern? Are we in line? Where does that fit?
I think every district, it's a major number in every district. So it is a concern because it's not something that needs to be paid in the current year, because every school district they say a pay-as-you-go method. So you pay your liability every year for the retirees' health insurance, and that's what you budget for. But the actuarial, the standards, require an actuary to determine this long-term liability that's out there. And while it's a huge number, fortunately, it doesn't have to be paid in 1 year. And I guess your liability this year compared to some of the districts I looked at went up a little bit more than other districts because the discount rate in some of the other districts was higher than yours. So because your discount rate, and I talked to your actuary, I had this discussion with the audit committee. I did discuss that with the actuary, and his rate seems, you know, in accordance, like our even though he's an actuary or he's an actuary, they follow our accounting standards. And our accounting standards, it's called GASB 75 in this case. GASB 75, particularly, it specifies what kind of discount rate is supposed to be used in these calculations. And he you know, I spoke to him in length on the phone, and he used an average of 3 different discount rates that were in accordance with the standards. So, you know, I don't know if your actuary did it right and other actuaries didn't do it as correct, but I noticed your discount rate was lower than a lot of other school districts this year. And I'm not an actuary, so I can't really say. I mean, it seemed reasonable to me, but that 1% change is an enormous, you know, it's multi-million dollars. You know, it could be $60 million change, a 1% increase or decrease in the district.
And Mark,
But Chris, to your question though, you can't do a one-to-one comparison in terms of what our, you know, deficit is compared to other districts, because our deficit is made up by our staff, you know, depending upon, you know, the quantity of staff we have, the age of the staff, the time before retirement, all plays into those numbers. So if you compared, you know, our deficit to another district like, you know, Pearl River or North Rockland, because their employee, you know, demographics is different than ours, you can't make a similar comparison. But all of them are extremely negative because of the liability we have for the outstanding pensions.
right,
Yeah.
and just
Basically done, like if the district closed its doors today, you know, what's its obligation in terms of, you know, these you know, long-standing liabilities.
right, and just for clarification, just for the public that's listening as well, it used to be prior to GASB 75, which was 45, we used to be able to determine this liability and spread it out over the course of, say, 30 years. With this new accounting standard, that liability has to be reflected in 1 year. So it's for purposes of issuing the financial statements. This is an aspect of it, but just to be clear, it does not represent or reflect an impact on our actual operational financial, nor does it affect our credit ratings that we would use, you know, either through Moody's or others for future or borrowing. So it's really a requirement reflective on the financial statements, but doesn't represent our operating financial plan. It's just how this new requirement requires us to recognize this liability in 1 year versus spreading it out over many, many years, as the old standard did previously.
Yeah, I mean, I was bringing up the question because I understood that this was a new standard that we were doing. So it just jumps out at me. And if everybody else is having to deal with this new standard, that was more of, you know, from a comparison to other districts that I was, you know, really, you know, pinpointing my question to. It looks like it's something new this year. So is it, you know, all other districts are being faced with this new standard. How does that compare to other districts?
Right. No, excellent question. And I think, you know, it goes back to this trend now where making public school districts financial statements represent more of the corporate model in terms of how the financial statements are prepared and represented. So, and again, I think, Mark, you mentioned this one, but, you know, every year we kind of look at what the new governmental accounting standing boards are going to put out, maybe new requirements. And I think we avoided several this year, I think, that were postponed due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
But excellent question.
Yeah. And as Alicia said, so a lot of these standards, particularly GASB 75, it was trying to, the people that came up with it said, we're trying to make governmental entities more comparable to the for-profit entities. And in this case, though, it's really skews the governmental entities' financial statements. I don't think they really realized when they came up with it that it would be skewing it that bad, but because the for-profits, this doesn't happen so much in the for-profit world. So something really, you know, but every municipality has this problem. So that's where you're all, you know, just as long as they compare, when you go to Moody's or whoever, they compare apples to apples, like municipal, if they want to compare a municipality, like a school district, to, you know, IBM, it doesn't work. So if as long as they compare you to other school districts, fine.
And I would add to it, now that we've adopted this standard, this is going to be subjected to changes in the estimate. So each year, as things like the discount rate that's being used, or if there's a change in mortality tables, right? Things like these changes in assumptions will create significant changes year on year and fluctuate in our financial statements. So we'll have to be very mindful of that. It's an important liability that we watch, but the important thing is, though, is it's not indicative of the actual cash that's being paid this year. It's an indication of the liability that we're accruing for future payments on this for this liability.
Yes.
Does the board have any other questions for Mr. Levy? Mark?
I'll just add, Alicia,
sure.
if you don't mind, I'll just add for the board's benefit. So we did have Mr. Levy come and present to the Finance Council and Audit Committee. The committee went through the financial statements extensively. Obviously a lot of discussion about the pension liability and this whole topic. But at the end of it, the committee approved the report. And obviously we're very pleased with, the fact that there were no deficiencies identified and the clean opinions that Mark shared earlier. So definitely our gratitude to the hard work of the business office, and delighted to see the outcome of the financial statement.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, good. This district, they should be commended. It was a good job.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Mark. I guess we'll be talking soon.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be in touch very soon. All right, thank you. Everybody stay well and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
So what I'd like to do is transition before we go to the capital project updates by the team. And sorry, team, I just want to share my screen and just run through a short presentation. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? So, tonight really begins with the culmination of our closeout for fiscal year 2019-2020. It really opens up our long-range financial and strategic planning process for this current school year, 2020-2021. And just to highlight again, as we think about how we begin our conversations and our focus on this year's strategic goal setting, as well as the long-range financial planning update that we do through this next current cycle, some of the financial highlights really speaking to how we as a district have maximized our fund balance dollars that really can be used to offset any potential negative impacts to our financial plan, whether they are decreases to our state aid, which we've seen, that continuing message of potential decreases in our state aid for this year that we still await finality on. Any type of unexpected emergencies or, increased expense in our current year operating budget. And really by maintaining our 4% of unassigned fund balance allowable by law, and the fact that we continue to replenish our reserve balances that are established for various legal purposes, in addition to our strong fiscal policies, controls, and practices that remain aligned to our strategic goals, really allows us to pivot and adjust to changes to our learning environment, which we've seen due to the COVID pandemic this past year. And it also ensures that we use our dollars effectively. All this said, our long-range financial planning is critically important to ensuring that we remain stable financially for the long term. So what's next? Next steps in our strategic planning process. The beginning would be to review where we were at the end of fiscal year 1920 at June 30th. And I know the board is used to seeing this document. This is how our fund balance at June 30th was realized. And I know Mark had just mentioned this. We ended up with a fund balance of roughly $28.2 million. And you'll see the allocation, the distribution of funds towards our established reserves at the bottom of the chart. We did take a concerted effort this year to carefully examine our tax certiorari liability and ensure that our dollars were distributed to this reserve that brought it up to the projected liability that the district may incur. So I know I want to keep this as a focus point as we begin to look at our long-range financial plan for this year, as well as our capital reserve. That was the second highest distribution of monies into the capital reserve. We know that for almost 2 years, we've been involved in a long-term master planning effort that will drive the preparation of future capital project referendums. We took a concerted effort on that. And of course, you see our unassigned fund balance at the end. And this is probably one of the most important documents that we use every year during our long-range financial, where we project out our 5-year financial plan, taking a close look at our revenues and expenditures, as well as our reserves and equaling up to a total fund balance, as you saw on the previous slide. When we begin this year's long-range financial planning, our next steps between Cleo and myself will be to update our 5-year projections. And given that we are in the middle of capital master planning and considerations of a potential future capital project referendum in the near term, we will update these numbers, but also run analyses in terms of how our property tax cap may be impacted over the long term, and also extend this more to a 10-year financial outlook in this year's strategic planning process. But I think it's going to be incumbent upon us as an overall governance team to pay close attention to the projected outer year deficits that we've seen on our 5-year financial plan summaries each year. And you see that based on this financial plan summary was done last at budget adoption. So that's the outer 3 years. You'll see in yellow at the bottom at that time what our projected outer year deficits could be. And we've seen that from time to time each year that we go through our long range financial planning process as part of our strategic alignment and effort. We've seen this. So that is something that we'll have to take a concerted focus on this year as well. And then our property tax cap at the top, running analyses alongside our master planning efforts to ensure that we're also examining our long-term financial outlook and how we may fund future capital work through the mix of utilizing the capital reserve that I mentioned on the last slide, or whether there is some borrowing involved. We really will continue to analyze how the impact on our property tax cap calculation is over time. Obviously, our goal with the tax levy is to have it remain flat and stable over the long term and not see huge swings up or huge swings down from a year-to-year basis. So that'll be the first step that we'll take after this evening as the kickoff to our long-range financial and strategic planning, is to really begin to update our projections based on the closeout of our fiscal year 2019-2020 and start to run those analyses as treated towards whether it's capital work or other programmatic initiatives that we may be considering as part of our goals next year to begin to align our financial projections towards those educational and those capital goals, long-term plans, and just make sure that our entire strategic plan stays in alignment as we've worked very hard over the last couple of years to make sure that is the case. With our strategic planning process, this really is just a graphic that shows the steps that we take during our strategic planning process or our continuous improvement cycle. Strategic planning beginning with our alignment of our goals between our program and our financial and capital long-range plans. It also involves our goal setting from a district level as well as a building level. We use our data as we've presented to the board previously to evaluate the success of our established goals, doing some benchmark mid-year as well as an end-of-the-year review on the success or the achievement of our goals, and then providing reports to the Board of Education and seeking your feedback and input. And then we're readjusting and planning for the following school year. This calendar I provided to the board a few weeks back as part of master planning. This planning calendar really represents the synthesis of the dates that we have available beginning in September, really through June, but most importantly for our efforts through to our budget vote, which is May 18th, 2021 this year. This allows us to make sure that we are effectively using our committees, such as our facilities, as well as our audit and finance committee, and using the board's time through the board meetings and workshops to go through the strategic planning process that includes the long-range financial, the educational, and the capital master planning. So this evening, I just highlighted a few of the key dates in blue, beginning with tonight, October 8th. Was the culmination of our year-end financial report and audit presented to the Board of Education. And again, tonight is really our kickoff to the beginning of our cycle. I didn't highlight this, but on November 5th, the superintendent and the cabinet will be presenting our goals under each of the 5 focus areas that will really set the stage for our buildings to present to the Board of Education their building goals and action plans. And those presentations will occur on November 19th with the elementary schools presenting, and then our secondary schools presenting on December 8th. Mid-year, we've asked Ms. Corcoran, our coordinator of data, to present to the board on January 7th an update, the data that we were using, the data collected so far, especially our local benchmark assessment data, connecting that to the building goals, and talking about the next steps from January 7th through to when we present year-end data and our results at the May 18th board meeting. One of the things that we heard very clearly from the Board of Education last May was that, are we doing sort of that mid-year check-in before the year's over, so that we have an opportunity to use the data to inform our decision-making, but also use the data to inform any adjustments or any further focus that we need to place on any gaps that may be presented, and give ourselves time from mid-year to the end of the year to make those adjustments and make every effort to be successful in our goals. So that's what we are this year. So we've added the January 7th meeting for that data mid-year review, as well as just an update on where we are in our strategic planning process. And you'll see the following as we carry out through the calendar. We really, as of January 21st, are presenting and at workshops and meetings the progress of our strategic, our long-range financial, but we're also in our budget development for the 2021-2022 school year. So pretty much throughout the entire calendar, you'll see the dates for reviewing our budget development along the way, leading to our budget adoption on April 22nd, our budget hearing on May 6th, as well as the vote on May 18th. Also this year, as I mentioned previously, we have been heavily involved in capital master planning. So you'll see a more time dedicated towards those efforts to ensure that we receive as much feedback and input from the Board of Education, as well as our other committees who have dedicated considerable amount of time working in partnership with the administrative team to get those plans in place. So tonight was just an overview as a kickoff to that. One, to inform the board on our performance financially and our audit controls for the previous fiscal year, but really to highlight the attention this evening that as an administrative team, we are heavily involved in updating our goals for this year. Some you will see are a continuation of the previous year, especially since the COVID pandemic kind of put sort of an unexpected or unique hold or change on some of our progress that we would have originally had planned in our cycle last year. So it disrupted that flow somewhat, but we're back on schedule. So we will discuss that more as the buildings and the district level administrators present. And I think what you will see this year as the district level and the buildings begin to present their goals is the perspective and the review of how the pandemic may have changed our perspective on our goals and what information we've garnered going through this incredibly challenging time and incorporating the things we've learned and things that we've identified that maybe need more attention than we would have previously thought when developing our goals. So you'll see that presented this year. And again, we are just remain focused on making sure that our strategic plan remains aligned in those key areas of district operation. And that's it. So thank you. Is there any questions on that aspect of the presentation, or Dr. Pritchard, you look like you wanted to say something?
No, I was just actually going to ask the board if you had any questions about your piece of this. I think it's just essentially what we wanted to do was sort of have that presentation be the connective tissue between the auditor's report, which is usually a great way of kicking off the year, and also connecting that to goals and objectives for the year, because it is incumbent upon us as providing strategic oversight to do that goal setting at the beginning of the operating cycle. And then thirdly, to reestablish that cycle. Just because COVID hit doesn't mean we've stopped being a school district with a cycle of continuous improvement. So we're still going to continue to follow or repeat that processes. It really did take us a long time to establish that framework, and we committed to creating an organizational structure to support that, as well as those processes. So again, COVID should not have slowed us down. I'm sure we're going to create. Obviously, we're going to improve and modify how we do business because of that, because we have to. But that's all reflected in the planning process. And Board of Education, you're going to start to see some of the action plans associated with the strategic plan in November. That's what we're going to have, as we've done in the past, where we have the principals do their presentations in November, December time frame. And that'll start to help shape and form some of your ideas as it relates to funding, as part of that. So you'll have an understanding as to how we develop that going forward. So that's just basically, again, we just really did want to provide you with a framework tonight to re-familiarize you with that framework. And what I'll do also additionally in terms of memorializing this actually is part of my goal setting for my annual evaluation. So this is really basically where I'm your agent in terms of I'm your guy on the ground to help you operationalize that strategic plan. So I'll formally articulate these goals and objectives as part of my initial goal setting as part of my evaluation. Again, you'll hold me accountable to those goals as they relate to this piece of the strategic plan, and then we'll continue to move forward as we have done in the past. So, I think it's very reassuring for the governance team and all people involved, from the boardroom down to the classroom. Again, there's familiarity with this, and so that was our main objective this evening in presenting this. So, are there any questions as it relates to Mrs. Koster's presentation?
And I just wanted to mention, I will put this in the board. I'll put the presentation and some of the backup materials in the board report tomorrow, so that the board does have a copy of what was presented this evening as well.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Koster.
Thank you.
I did have one. I'm sorry. I did have one additional item that I wanted to present this evening. as part of my superintendent's report. And I'll end with that pending any other questions you might have. But this with the COVID response.
And then we have capital.
And I have to get my eyes checked. Okay, so you're absolutely right. So why don't we do that? I do see that our architects and our construction management are here. So Mrs. Foster, please go ahead and I stand corrected. Go ahead and
Sure.
capital project.
So who would like to go first, Ms. Tarcio or Mr. York and Mr. Rodriguez? So I'll put you whichever up on the screen first.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Miss Lauren. Let me, so I put some of this up and let me get this set. Okay, so what I will do is, Lauren, I will switch back and forth. Unfortunately, with Google Meet, I have to go back and forth with the sharing. So I can scroll, just let me know, and I'll switch documents when you're ready.
Okay, sure. So this is the memo that we've been seeing throughout all of our capital construction projects. So this one is specifically for phase 2, which was the $11.5 million project that was voted 2 years ago. So out of phase 2, we broke this project up into 3 different phases. So phase 2A was the CLE library, which has been completed. Phase 2B was several scope items throughout the district, most notably the turf field at the high school. We had some boiler work at the high school, water heater replacement and transformer replacement at CLE, cafeteria and gym door installation and stage access. We did the handicap lift at the stage at Schaefer and the bathrooms at Schaefer. We did an oil tank replacement at the TZ Elementary School, and then the auditorium cooling project and the sound booth at SOMS. So all those projects have been completed thus far. So this past summer, we've been working on phase 2C, which is at the high school, the bleacher and press box project. We put some ventilation into the gym. We worked on upgrading some toilet rooms at the high school. And then at SOMS, we did some remediation to the wall in the art rooms for moisture. Right now, we're working on a library renovation. We did an art room renovation and, again, upgrading bathrooms at SOMS. And then at CLE, we installed new HVAC units in the cafeteria. We did new rooftop units in the admin area. And then again, upgrading the bathroom. So the majority of that work is in punch list phase right now. So we've gone through the buildings. We've made a list of any of the miscellaneous items that still need to be touched up throughout. The one piece of that scope that we still have open and will be until about the end of this month will be the library renovation. And I'll hand this over to Dennis in a minute. He can talk more about what's left there. So Felicia, you want to scroll down? Okay, so this is really the overall budget for those monies allocated to the phase 2 project. So like I said, this project was voted, I think 2 years ago. It was $11.5 million was allocated to the project. We identified an incidental budget of roughly $2.1 million. So that's the budget to pay your architects and your engineers and your construction management, any legal costs, admin costs, such as any of the miscellaneous costs that support the construction project. So then out of the remaining funds, we have $9 million to allocate to construction work. So the table below outlines the 2 phases that we already have complete. Phase 2A, the library, and then phase 2B, the miscellaneous work, and that's all broken up into the specific contracts and then what the contract values ultimately landed at. So everything grayed out is completed and closed out. Phase 2C is still ongoing. So these numbers are still subject to change. But this is a snapshot in time of where we stand right now as far as contract values. So as of today, we have a total contract value of $8.5 million. So that leaves roughly $900,000, or almost 900,000, 177,188 left over on this project in total. Does anyone have any questions on the finances?
Lauren, this is Lou. Just wanted to add that we had budgeted $5.4 million for phase 2C, and we brought the project in at 4.6, and we're still within the 4.6 million on phase 2C.
And then just for the board's awareness as well, as Lauren mentioned, 2A and 2B are closed out, and we have worked and filed those final cost project reports with the state already. So they are up with the state, so we'll drive that building aid beginning next year. So a full year worth of aid beginning next year. And then as soon as phase 2C is complete and the punch lists are done, we'll work to close out phase 2C and file those final cost project reports with the state as well. And that'll completely conclude the work that was voted on by our taxpayers from 2015-16 through 2018-2019 phase 1 and phase 2 work. Lauren, did you want me to switch to the contract status log? Is that something we need to review?
But before you go off this page, I got one question.
Sure,
So the building aid doesn't start until the year after you close out a project?
Correct. And depending when you file it, if you file project reports beyond, and let me correct myself, if you file most often before December 31st in the year in which the project's closed, you'll drive that full year's worth of aid in that current year. If you file after December 31st in the current year that it closes out, you would drive half a year's worth of aid. So the way that we filed, because we knew that, especially with phase 1, we wanted to wait and collect a full year's worth of aid beginning this year, just to offset some of our tax cap calculations with this project now, 2A and 2B. As long as it's complete, it's approved, we should drive, and I'll correct myself, a half a year's worth of aid this year, and then we will be full aid next year. Phase 2C with the library, especially going out to October 30th, and by the time that we complete the full project, completely closed out, fully paid out in those project reports, those most likely would be submitted after the December 31st date. So we would wait a year until that's done. And depending on if the state maintains the same building aid rules as they've had previously, we know that in prior executive budget proposals, our governor has tried to switch how building aid was approved and when the flows of aid began with school districts. So that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on during this legislative season as well, because that's been attempted every year for the last.
But so to my question, then, why wouldn't we push? Why wouldn't we strive to get the library closed out by December 31st?
We definitely want to make sure that the aid we start to have the aid flow, that we have enough capital debt so that it doesn't inadvertently negatively impact our calculation when we go to calculate the tax levy for next year. So one of the things that we do during long range is forecast out when we expect a scope of work under approved construction project to be done in what year, as well as when the aid flows start, so that when we do our capital exclusion on the tax cap calculation, we make sure that the aid is positively received and it doesn't inadvertently have a negative impact on our calculation. And so we've done that work from year to year, knowing that we were kind of playing catch up with this capital work. I just think by the time that the library also is done at the end of October, and then all the punch listing happens, and then we're completely closed out, we're going to be in a really tight window. And when we did the initial projection, we had already projected out that phase 2C would not be submitted until after that December 31st deadline. So our financial projections for the capital exclusion were based on us filing after that December 31st date to generate the aid flow to start when we needed it to start based on our overall debt that's included in the property tax cap calculation.
I mean, either way, we should push to get the library done. When we file, it's a whole other story. But
Yeah,
I'd hate to see the library. You know, if it takes, you know, from May to October, 5 months to do the work. 2 months to do punch list is, I'll say, not acceptable.
Yeah, and Mr. Jacobs, and that's a good point. I will clarify that when we file the project reports to the state, that in no way should be aligned to the timeline when the contractors finish. They need to finish as expeditiously as possible. We do the punch listing with Lauren. We make sure that everything's correct, and we close out those contracts as soon as possible. The filing is a separate mechanism. So we have definitely, that's not something we don't communicate to the contractors. We've really, I know Dennis has really pushed to make sure the contractors have kept a task with the library, and the reports are a separate timeline for filing those. So we'll keep them going so that they finish and that the punch listing is done on a timely basis. And we get these retainages paid out to the contractors for overall 2C.
Yeah, this is Lou talking. Usually it's not the punch list that's going to be the issue at the end. It's usually just getting the closeout documents, the consent of sureties, the releases of liens, and we hold that 5% on the contract until we've gotten, in particular, the releases of liens, all the warranty information, O&Ms, final training. So it's really, it's nickel dime stuff at the end, but we have to hold that money. Otherwise, if we paid the guys off, we're not going to get those minor things that are owed at the end. I say minor, a consent to surety, final release of liens. The closeout documents process is pretty extensive, above and beyond punch list. And that's usually what takes the time. And that's why we hold that 5% retainage on the contractors. So.
Barring there's no other questions at this point, Lauren, were you going to review the contract status summary? Is that something?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to review the status summary in detail. It's really meant for backup for the memo, just so the board is aware of, all the financial picture of the project.
Okay, thank you. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dennis and Lou. I just need to switch screens for 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, so Dennis, just let me know, and I'll switch slides for you.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. Again, this is our October 2020 Board of Education update. Next slide, please. I will go through this. Is for phase 2C, and it consists of an executive summary, which is prime contract progress overview, direct vendor progress, and contractor schedule overview. Then there's project progress photos, and the budget summary we've already had, and of course, is review on safety. Next, please. Part of it, some of the acronyms we use, right? CLES is Cottage Lane Elementary School, SOMS is South Orangetown Middle School, TZHS, Tappan Zee High School, and CPL is Clark Patterson Lee, our architects, and TPG is Diploma Group, of course. I changed this a little bit, our presentation. I went back from schools to the contractors. Grace Contracting is our general construction contractor. The work at Cottage Lane and Tappan Zee is complete except for punch list items, as Lauren mentioned. At SOMS, the art rooms and bathrooms are in punch list phase. The library, Grace has installed a new lobby, terrazzo floors and ceilings. They've completed the drywall and drywall finishing. They've installed the projector screen, shade boxes. They've installed the ceilings in a new makerspace, the conference room, and in the offices. They have installed the new exterior windows and most of the glass. They're currently applying the acoustic insulation with the finished paint to follow. Next, please. Phase 2C, Joe Lombardo Plumbing and Heating holds our mechanical contract. And the work at Cottage Lane is mostly complete except for punch list items. At SOMS, the bathrooms and art rooms are also in the punch list phase. In the library, they have installed the fin tube heat and covers and the radiator. Excuse me. They've installed the duct drops into the offices, makerspace, and conference room. They've roughed in all building management systems controls. They have the startup of the rooftop unit and balancing of the systems left. At Tappan Zee High School, as the one mentioned, they have finished the contract work. However, they have change order work forthcoming due to field conditions. Next, please. HBS, of course, is an electrical contractor. The work at Cottage Lane Elementary School is finished except for punch list. They finished the Tappan Zee High School work except for punch list. They're currently installing the data rack at the bleachers. At SOMS, they've energized the third floor panel. They've pulled all the required data back to the data closet. They've tied in the rooftop units and roughed off fixtures, public address, and fire alarms. They're currently installing fixtures in the makerspace, offices, and conference room. Integrity Mechanical is our plumbing contractor. They finished the work at Cottage Lane and Tappan Zee except for punch list items. At SOMS, they have the bathrooms, art rooms finished up the punch list. They have one sink in the makerspace to install. And on here it says it's scheduled for the week of 10/26, actually going in on 10/13, I believe. Bear with me. 10/13, yes. So it'll be done on that by that time. Okay. Our direct vendors, Nickerson has installed the casework in the art rooms. They're awaiting punch list, the punch list to do their work. The casework for the makerspace is on site. It's down in the store, down in room 181A. It's expected to install the week, actually on 10/12, next Monday, they're going to be there and install it. The library circulation desk is scheduled to install the week of 10/26. I have to have clarification on this. I received an email from Nickerson on Tuesday morning. They say they're going to be late with that. They may be on November 2nd. Dan Clayton, who's our bleacher contractor, has minor work left on the bleachers, and I spoke with them today. They were going to finish tomorrow, 10/10. Onto the schedule. The original schedule, again, had a start date of June 29, 2020. The milestone schedule was based on that date. The schedule start was moved up to May 18th, giving the project additional 6 weeks of work time, allowing for the governmental COVID policies and additional lead times. All trades are currently working and on schedule to finish by the 10/30 substantial completion date. We actually have sinks that had normally are 6-week lead times, 3 months, 4 months sometimes, some of them. Some of the leads just the year of COVID just got blown out of the water. A few, excuse me, photographs. I apologize, I don't have other photographs. My computer's on the fritz, but here's a nice shot of our new bleachers. They look great. They really do. They pop out nice, and you're going to have a great field down there. And again, another shot of it. The red just stands right out. It's very nice. And this is a library in progress. And for next month's presentation, I'll have a picture of the before taken from the same spot and the after taken from the same spot, looking this direction. Where the plywood is there, that all goes back in glass. So that's when you come up the stairs, you have a grand glass entryway. It's going to be beautiful. Next. In our lobby here, you can see the lobby. This is our new terrazzo. You have the white terrazzo in the front and the red terrazzo that follows with the radius soffit above it. There's new acoustic ceilings going in. It looks very nice. The terrazzo really pops. And here's a view from the other side. It really, really looks good. Again, where you see the temporary doors there, that comes out. There's going to be glass going in there. So you're going to have quite an entry to your media center here, library. Somebody can go by this. We did this. Safety first, always. Students and safety priority is first. Safety is first priority, always. The construction workers and staff, construction workers and students and staff are separated by hard walls. The contractors are required to wear ID badges, and of course, they're all Raptor verified also. The CM the Palumbo Group always has full-time supervision during construction, and all communications are through the construction manager. And we have.
And what I'm going to do, Dennis, is switch to document.
Thank you. What we did is he made a Gantt chart for the month of October, which is a little chart. And it lists day by day where we're going to be. And I want the board to see this.
Dennis, while she's doing that, can you talk about how the protocols have went with COVID and contractors working through that?
It's been it's been tough on everybody. Usually you're trying to keep, especially in plumbing contractors, you have smaller crews going in, and we had crews of 2 and 3 people, but normally you'd have more than that. You can work on both sides. It's been tough on everybody. The contractors we had, I have to give them their due, have been very good about it. They've maintained the social distancing. We don't have a lot of issues with masks and stuff. We had some good contractors here. We really did. It's been a pleasure to work with them. If there's an issue with anything going on, I received a call or from Jack or the business office, whoever, the contractor right away. There's never a question about it. It was yes, sir, and they did it. So it's been good. It's been tough. There's other projects and other schools have been dragged out much. This we'll be in good shape. I think we'll be in very good shape at the end of the month. So if you look at the Gantt chart, it starts out the general construction contractors in blue, right? Today's the 9th. So we roof spray deck insulation. It's not really insulation. It's more of an acoustical insulation. They started on Monday and they should finish on Friday. Also on Friday, we're going to start painting. And they're going to be painting in the makerspace, the offices, and the conference room. Where they're not painting, the next line down, the yellow, is lights. That's our electrical contractors. They put lights in the same space as the lobby, the makerspace, the conference rooms, and the offices. Excuse me. We go to next week on Monday, makerspace cakes work goes in. That's a day's project. On Tuesday, they're doing the sink. But at the same time, they're starting to do the acoustic cloud that goes in, right? So you walk into the library, you have clouds that hang down. It's set up so you have clouds and lights that hanging down to be beautiful. And there's about 7 days of installation on the clouds. Doors and hardware will be going on at the same time. The carpet is going to be installed in the office and maker spaces next Wednesday. Start next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. At the same time, the shade pocket's going to be actual shade motor. The shades themselves, the pockets in, the shades themselves will be installed at the windows. I see this. The next thing is they're doing data tie-ins at the same time over in the data closet in the 3rd floor. I think they pulled 118 lines of data over there. It's a lot of data in the building. Next thing down is the glass for the doors, which is the fire-rated aluminum. The doors that are in the offices and makerspaces, there's glass in there. The next thing is the fire-rated storefront. That's going to start on the following Monday, and that should go about 8 days until the following Tuesday. And they'll take the temporary wall down. The floor boxes being electrical, that's your data and your power for your laptops and everything. That'll be taken care of. The carpet in the main lobby will be going at the same time that the floor boxes are going in, because the floor boxes sit inside the carpet. The 26th, the storefront window sills go back in when the 21st, And the 26th is the rooftop unit gets started up. Then we're doing balancing the 27th, 28th, 29th, and final cleaning the 28th to the 30th. All the contractors are on board with these dates. They're good with them. If you walk into the library now, it's a big empty room except for the people that are in there, they're spraying right now and painting. Any questions on schedule?
When are the other schools going to be done with their punch list?
The punch list, I think we'll actually be seeing the punch list on Friday, Lonnie. They have not received the punch list. Punch list was scheduled originally in the contract schedule was scheduled to go in November, so they'll start their punch list work probably next week. Some we're working Monday, in the high school and in middle school. And they're working on punch lists at those 2 days, those 2 places on Monday. I haven't seen a punch list myself, so I don't, but it shouldn't be that big. It really shouldn't be that bad.
So Dennis, you said that the circulation desk in the library delivery was pushed out to November 2nd. So the substantial completion then of the library should be what, November 3rd, November 4th? I mean, how long is the work after the desk is delivered?
Well, that's a good question. They probably have about 2 days of install. This is in Nickerson. We're holding the date as substantial completion at 10:30. We try to get these guys to get their product and to install. If it's really, if they can't get the product, that's one thing. But I don't know how much I believe that. You know, it could be that they'll be overbooked. I don't know. But we're 10:30, and we're going to push them to get here on 10:30. Get it here before that.
Yeah, we've been experiencing delays with Nickerson and other companies like that. So that's pretty consistent. And we've seen, you know, some significant delays in orders from Nickerson and those type of manufacturers. You know, hopefully we push them for 10:30. You know, I think we'll have to have conversations as a team if everything else is done and we're waiting for an install of a circulation desk. You know, we will begin to put all the final numbers together and close out everyone else and kind of sit in holding pattern for that last contractor to pay that out. Even though it's a direct vendor, we can get most of the primes closed out by then, assuming everything else is done on the punch list, and then just be prepared to file. But hopefully it's not too delayed, because we have seen significant delays from Nickerson in general.
Yes, yeah. You're absolutely right. And Nickerson, the product is actually made down south, and they've had some issues down south with COVID. I know that could be part of it. But again, we'll hold them to the 30th. And as far as closeout goes, I actually started on our bi-weekly job meetings. I started closeout documents in June. At the end of June, I said, start getting your closeout stuff ready, because it's a process and there's a lot involved in it. So I tell the contractors, start your stuff, get your binders ready, get all your data, get your information together, get your books together, get everything ready. So when we're done, we don't have this long lead time before we actually do close out the projects.
Yeah. And I know for Jack Rallo's purposes, it's critically important that he has an opportunity to review the O&M manuals as well as the as-built, as long as the team, to make sure that we get everything that we expect to get. And then we sort of have that historical record on file from this project.
Absolutely. And also the contractors, like our mechanical contractor owes Jack and the maintenance staff and the custodian staff training. All. So you're absolutely right. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to on the Nickerson side, we did go back and forth on whether the circulation desk should have been in the GC's contract, because we were buying casework in other spaces. It made sense to go to state contract with Nickerson, and I still do believe that, because on the budget side, we did great with the budget, but the state contract vendors have been recently have been really hard to deal with as far as schedule, as opposed to prime contractors. So I'm still pretty happy, to where we are with budget and with schedule right now.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we always have liquidated damages at our disposal for every day past substantial completion of 10:30 as well. So we remain that as a lever to push contractors to get their materials in and complete the job.
Absolutely.
Does the board have any other questions for the architect and CM?
I would just say that we need to stay on the contractors to get them closed out of their punch list as quickly as possible. Because we want the students and staff, fully utilizing the spaces, as they were intended. So the majority of the work was scheduled to be done by the end of the summer. And, the library is scheduled to be done by the end of October. And, we have students in the building. We don't have all the students in the building, but we have staff in the building. And we need to get these things all fully functional and usable as soon as possible.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. So with that, thank you, Dennis, Lou, and Lauren for joining us this evening for this update.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mrs. Coster.
Thank you, Dr. Richard.
Yeah, so great information, and thank you, Board of Education, for your feedback on the projects. The final topic in the superintendent's report is really centered on something that's very topical, which is how we've been responding, or how districts have responded to the COVID-19 outbreak. In our county, it's a topic of discussion most recently because we are seeing zip codes that are being identified as red zones, not in our school district, but certainly in parts of the county. And at 6 p.m. tonight, I just received an email from a colleague in the county that the East Ramapo district has remained closed for another 14 days in accordance with the governor's directive as being a sort of a red zone. So this was not an initiative taken by the district, but an initiative to close that was initiated by the governor. So there's, this does create some confusion, I know, in and amongst the folks who are living through this, because it seems that there's no consistent practice in terms of authority. Who has authority to close? Who has authority to quarantine? Who has what's the difference between quarantining and isolating? And there's an awful lot of confusion. So I thought I'd take a minute or two tonight just to sort of briefly outline how we've responded. We most recently, and I won't spend a ton of time on this, but just because I think that much of what happens is situationally dependent, and also the hour being 9 o'clock. I know we don't, it's not typically a time of the evening where we do our best our best thinking. So I will express that in I think it was last week we received the end of September we did receive the pre-K to grade 12 COVID-19 toolkit from the Department of Health, and this document was actually done collaboratively between the office of the New York State Department of Education, the governor's office, and the New York State Department of Health. And the different scenarios that this toolkit describes first are, answering the questions of whether or not a child can go to school today. And there's a flow chart that walks us through that. And consistently speaking, me as the superintendent, and I know that this holds true for the other superintendents of the county, we will be using this flow chart in order to sort of coordinate the effort between the school district and the Department of Health. Another question that would be asked is whether or not your child who has COVID-19 symptoms, if they've been quarantined or they are staying out of school, when can they go back to school? And again, there's it's very much situationally dependent upon whether or not there's been a positive test result or a negative test result. And again, there's far too many outcomes on those decision trees to really go into this evening. But suffice it to say that we do have a framework to make those determinations. Another question that oftentimes and that we've just faced as a district: can I go to work? Can I go to work at the school today? And unlike some districts in the county, we actually have people working in our buildings. Because I know that we're one of the first districts to actually have folks return to work in person. And again, that would be that decision would really be a function of whether or not a person has had a positive or negative outcome on a COVID test, whether or not they've traveled internationally or out of state, whether or not they're exhibiting symptoms of COVID. And we do review these sort of these symptoms or these variables each day with all of our employees and all of our students as we go through the medical screening upon entry, as well as the questionnaires, the surveys that we ask of each of the folks who are coming in each day. And in the event that there at any decision point there's a determination made that the person can't come to work, then we would take the next steps, which is the person would not be able to go to school. And when can I go back to school if you have those COVID-19 symptoms? Again, there's a whole decision matrix that is associated with making that decision. One of the questions that has come up sort of repeatedly for us recently has been whether or not because we have had a positive case here in the district a few weeks ago, and that person's doing fine now. That person has returned, and that person is actually healthy now. But we do look at the data around the county. Children aged 5 through 17 in our particular school district, there are two. There are no staff that have tested positive. There have been 2 students in our catchment area who have tested positive. One goes to is a private placement, and the other one again is one of our students. But all of that has been traced and tracked by the Department of Health, and those exclusions are managed by the Department of Health with our assistance. One area of contention is that for instance, a student or a staff member tests positive, the Department of Health really is engaged in the process of determining whether or not how to what that exclusion protocol for contacts of symptomatic students and staff are. So again, there is a decision tree that's associated with that. I won't run through it, but I think it's important for everyone to know that I don't pre-screen those folks. I'm not a department. I don't work for the Department of Health. I don't have a background in public health. I'm not a medical. I don't have a medical background, and I know that's probably something that almost seems a little facetious. But I do think that there are folks who wonder why it is they have to stay home for 14 days or when they can return. I don't make that determination, and it would be, I think, a little bit reckless if I were to pre-screen folks. If indeed the Department of Health wished to speak to those folks. So we give the Department of Health the information that they need to do the work that they need to do. However, the decision to close or remain open, that does fall upon me, and there is a decision protocol for that as well. There was a nearby school district, and it was in the newspaper today in the county where they did have a positive, not in our district, where there was a positive case or 2, and the school district remained open, even though there will be folks who will likely be quarantined or isolated as a result of that. But that was a decision that was made by the superintendent. And lastly, as it relates to contacting and working with the local health department and coordinating that, and that coordination for contact tracing, that we do have a team, that we have a response team, and we've worked very closely with Jack Galina, who's coordinated the training and preparation for our COVID response team. It is Dr. Joe Lloyd and Dr. Tessick, and myself, along with Mr. Galino. And we make that determination in terms of how to execute that flow chart, how to execute that response, and how the manner in which we communicate with our local health department as well as the community at large. So again, this is all very well scripted at this point. It wasn't a week ago, I will say that. Although I think we did a very good job of responding, given the information that we had at the time. However, I do say that I think this is a much more prescriptive response protocol that we've received very recently. I've shared that with the board in last week's Board of Education report. I know that we like to often say that, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. But we have been through this. It's not for us. It isn't a question of if. We've already executed this protocol. We've learned a lot from our experience. We have those structures and supports in place. And at the end of the day, we're trying to prevent the spread of COVID, and do that while we're educating students. And as long as I'm superintendent, we're not going to contribute to the spread of this disease, and we're going to do everything that we can do to manage it in as aggressive capacity as possible, while still giving our students a high quality education. So that's just a quick overview, a quick rundown of where we're at. Again, you might hear more in the local media in the days ahead, because this protocol goes right out the window if the governor decides to exercise that public health response, which would be to become a little bit less permissive, a little bit more aggressive in terms of managing the COVID spread. I know we've seen some examples of that in New York City, and also as of this evening, right here in the county, in the East Ramapo School District. So how that will affect us, we don't know yet, but it's still, managing this right now is still a function of local control. But again, that could change based on the spread of the COVID illness. So I'll go ahead and stop at that there, and then open it up to any questions that the Board of Education might have at this point.
Kara has a question, Ms. Stephanopoulos.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm just looking back at the decision flow charts of, if my child may go to school today, and I don't see on there at all if a student is absent, even if it's not COVID related, that they do need a negative test to come back to school. But I think that has been the case from what I've been hearing. And so I'm just wondering, is that a Department of Health? Is that our policy? And is that a Department of Health recommendation? And just because it's not represented on any of the flow charts, or I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, so Dr. Stepani and I met with our local superintendents, or county superintendents today, and while this is a much more prescriptive document, it's by no means all inclusive of every scenario, right? So the idea that somebody would need a test to return we can't mandate that folks, receive that test. We can't make people get tested. I guess that's really a Department of Health responsibility, and they would notify folks. Or actually, that would be a recommendation from your local health provider. But we would want to see some, through our nurse, through Dr. Tessick and our health offices, we would want some assurance that a student or a staff member had a negative test result prior to returning to school. So,
So how does that work if the test can't be, if we can't mandate people to get tests then, right? So what, so a student is absent, they have allergies or they have something COVID unrelated, they don't take a test and then they come back to school. Is that?
Yeah, we wouldn't assume that they were positive. We couldn't exclude them from school based on what you've just described. However, if they had like a fever, that hasn't changed. So
Right.
let's just follow this example through where a student has a sore throat or has strep and has a 102-degree fever and probably gives it some indication, not knowing that the child had strep. Maybe you think it would certainly be prudent to assume that the child might be infected. So the student would, we would strongly encourage the parent to take the child to the pediatrician to get some sort of evaluation to see where we were at. But even prior to COVID, if a student was exhibiting a fever, we wouldn't allow the child to return to school. But let's say that the child was fever-free. The child had, we suspected the child had strep. The child was fever-free for at least 24 hours. We wouldn't exclude the child. We would not exclude the child from school based on not just the flow chart, but just based on our standing practice of not doing that. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. So then students are not mandated to have a negative test in order to return to school.
They are not mandated, students or teachers, for that matter.
Okay.
So it's not like you're, because it's like you're guilty, and maybe that's what's happening in and around the county. We don't necessarily want to assume that if we don't know whether or not it's COVID, we shouldn't, we can't mandate that the individual gets tested, but we would strongly encourage them to treat it like it was COVID.
Right.
Certainly, if the individual was fever-free for at least 24 hours, we wouldn't preclude this. We wouldn't exercise an abundance of caution in that regard. To that end, we would assume that they were healthy, that if they weren't exhibiting symptoms. But again, we would not allow a child to be in school if they were sick, or even an adult. We would strongly encourage them to stay home if they were sick, COVID or otherwise.
Right.
I think there has to be some local discretion there. And that may have factored into why, again, I don't know the thought processes that have happened in and around the county when these things have happened, because it just seems like there's just so many different possible outcomes.
Right.
And we would never open. And I guess that would be certainly the downside of being overly cautious, that it would be very difficult to operate.
Other board members have a question? I don't see any. I've got a couple of questions and comments. I'm going to stay with COVID for a minute, and Dr. Stepanian raises a very important question, because as we move into the fall season, we're moving into the flu season, we're moving into the cold season, we're moving into the allergy season, where her scenario that she raised is going to become a very prominent scenario, that we need to make sure that everybody is fully aware and cognizant of the steps and the measures that are expected of them, because the flu symptoms have very similarities to the COVID symptoms, but at the same token, you have allergy symptoms, which typically don't lend themselves to a fever. But again, we need to make sure that everybody's under the same understanding and everybody has a good understanding of the protocols necessary to return to school. And I say that now going into the COVID flow charts that are out there, and Dr. Pritchard and I have had various conversations about them, that the COVID flow charts and the COVID terms that are being used in terms of whether you isolate or whether you quarantine, or whether you've been in contact with an individual with a positive cases, all have definitive definitions by either the local Department of Health or the CDC. And those terms unfortunately get thrown around in public and in the news interchangeably, and they're not. There's definite differences between quarantine and isolate, and whether you've been in close contact with an individual that is tested positive with for COVID, or whether you've just been in contact or in association with someone with COVID. So when we're talking about providing information to the Department of Health, or when we're talking about a conversation of a response, we need to always make sure that we're clear with the terms we're using, and we stay with the definitions that have been established. So I raise that and I throw that out. And then further to the conversation with COVID is we've been focused and are discussing COVID protocols within the district, and that's all fine and good, but our protocols that allow us to keep our doors open and allow students to come to the building is truly dependent upon what happens and individual actions outside the district. We have control, we have protocol, and I'll say guidelines and rules for what happens within our facilities, within our classrooms, within our district property. That can all be for naught if they're not maintained by our students and our families outside the district. As we can see what's going on around the country and around the state, that it can only take one individual that feels they don't need to comply with the guidance that we've been provided, that can compromise the entire district. And I just ask that everybody think about that in terms of their actions and the behaviors, whether in school or outside the school window, that their decisions and their ramifications can have vast consequences to a tremendous amount of people. And I can't stress that more, that we all need to think about our decisions and the ramifications that they will have to the entire district. Because as I said, it can only take one individual that can require us to close the doors and force us to becoming remote. So I'll get off my soapbox on that. And then I just want to add further to Dr. Pritchard's report early on of this meeting regarding the PTA, that the PTAs are out there. They are, trying to do their best under these situations as well. And, they typically use the back to school nights as recruiting opportunities and sign up opportunities for the parents to join the PTAs, the staff to join the PTAs, and at the high school for the students to join the PTAs. And again, I just wish everybody would keep that in mind when you're looking at the school websites and you're reading information about the PTAs or hearing about the PTAs, that we continue to support the PTAs during this time frame. Does any board member want to talk about any committee reports? I know Mr. LaMadrid spoke about the facility, the audit and finance committee report that we had in preparation of the presentation tonight. As I saw Dr. Stepanian, go ahead.
Yeah, the Equity Coalition met last week as well. So do you want to do that now? Should I? Yeah,
if we're ready to move on, from Dr. Pritchard's, I didn't see anybody had any more comments from Dr. Pritchard's, the superintendent's report. So I was going to move on to the committee report. So, but by all means, unless someone else has something to add to the superintendent's reports.
I have one more question in terms of COVID, or one more sort of comment question. And I know it's late and I don't want to open a can of worms, but I am very curious. I know today was the first of the half days, the sort of shifting around of the schedule, and in hopes to give the teachers a little breathing room. So I'm curious to know how the teachers are responding to that, and I'm curious to know also. I know we had spoke about pulling together a sort of focus group of teachers to talk about ways that how they feel they could be better supported. So I'm just curious on how that's moving along, because I see them working double, triple hard, and I'm worried about them.
I couldn't have said that better. It was kind of interesting that you brought that up, Dr. Stepanian, because I thought maybe I would adjust the agenda tonight to include a few comments about that. And I didn't, because I didn't want anybody to get the hook out because maybe I was talking too much. So, but since you asked the question, my travels around the district today really have been to sort of reassure our staff. If I had gone to our staff in the middle of August and said, listen, guys, I need you to run a marathon in 2 weeks. You don't have to win it. You just have to kind of finish it, maybe run a little, walk a little. Are you good with that? And they would have all said, absolutely, Bob, we think you're crazy, but we'll do it. Just because, we know what's at stake here. I think what we've asked them to do is roughly the equivalent of asking them to run a marathon. And I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point. But as we know, they're exhausted. We've asked them to do some things that maybe are a little bit of a stretch, that made them very uncomfortable, have created, I think, a huge amount of stress. We're doing things that, and I'm not saying this to be boastful, but we're doing things that other districts aren't. To be able to teach two sets of students, one at home and one in your classroom at the same time, there aren't a lot of school districts that are doing that. And with very few exceptions, hopefully with no exceptions, 100% of our students are getting that experience. 100% of our teachers are engaged in that practice. They're running that marathon as I've directed them to do that, metaphorically. Yeah. So we knew that there had to be some time for them to, well, in very practical, technical terms, Dr. Kulat did create a schedule for the different buildings today to kind of review, to go through some training protocols, to introduce them to some new software or practices that might make, those lessons go a little more easy. I do think that since we've opened, I think that, and these are conversations I've had with teachers throughout the course of the day, they're becoming a little bit more familiar with the technology, with the routine. It's become a little bit more routine for them. It's still not easy. And we do know that there are some who are just struggling tremendously, not just the teachers, but students as well. But we hope they're becoming fewer and fewer. But by and large, we feel that most of the teachers, even though they're exhausted, are doing a tremendous job, and they needed today, if not to learn the test, to become better with the technical aspects of this, but to be able to reflect, to be able to ask questions, and to be able to have that inform their practice. We think that we have another couple of sessions scheduled. Rather than doing it, and this is a conversation I had with the ESO leadership, I had suggested that we do sort of an open mic like we had done with the community, like we had done with the teachers, to do sort of a Zoom live where we would solicit questions, comments, feedback. The leadership of the Teachers Association sort of talked me out of that, and I think it was a good idea that they did talk me out of it, because I think they wanted to break that down a little bit by building level, by team. But it would have made more sense to do it sort of a boots on the ground approach, by department, by grade level, rather than sort of the emotional outpour of having the superintendent, with 400, 300 teachers on there, talking about how exhausted they are. We didn't know how productive that could be. Whereas if they broke down in smaller groups with their building level leaders, they could start to fashion some solutions, which they did today. And I think they did a really nice job of that. And they needed to do that. I think Covey calls it sharpening the saw. You need to take some time to sharpen your saw before you go out and cut down trees. So they were sharpening the saw today. I think some of the Dr. Stepani, I think some of the anxiety, some of the stress, I think it's not going away. It's going to be there as long as we're doing this. But now it's more positive stress. It's not that sort of stress that makes you not want to get out of bed in the morning or choose another career. I think we're past that. That was my feeling, and from my management by walking around perspective today. And I did have an opportunity not only to listen but also to express my gratitude to the teachers, and an acknowledgement for really the hardship that they've been going through, to have sort of retool and rework how they do their jobs. So that's my sense. So I think we, like in subsequent half days, I know we've got I want to say 2 more before December. We'll continue to come back to this and refine this. Dr. Kulat, what I will have him do, I know he did put, actually he's already done that. Today he was working really diligently on his weekly Board of Education report. I'm giving you a bit of a summary, but he did provide a sort of a detailed write-up of what happened today and what needs to be done going forward. So I'll wait for him to share that with you tomorrow. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Stepani, do you want to go back to the board report or the committee report?
Yeah. So the Equity Coalition met for the first time last week. And I want to say that I want to start by commending the district for taking a proactive stance here and setting up this coalition. And thank you to Dr. Lloyd for spearheading, getting the ball rolling here. And as the first of the meetings, you know, we spent some of the time just introducing all of the members. There are a lot of members to the coalition, and you know, I think you know, given the national climate surrounding a multitude of equity issues, you know, racial issues in particular, in light of everything happening in the country in reaction to George Floyd's murder, and in light of how our community has responded and a multitude of differing opinions and you know, sometimes quite divisive. I think that the coalition has a big task, and I think that you know, providing a platform for all the stakeholders, for, you know, and I was really happy to see that there were a handful of students that were represented, staff, teachers, administrators, community members, and I think it's going to be a really really positive addition to the district, and giving everybody this platform to have an open dialogue about, you know, these sometimes hard to talk about topics. So the first meeting was great. Since then, there's been some further correspondence. Dr. Lloyd is setting up a Google Classroom, so as sort of as like a clearinghouse for people to have access to the documents and information, and which I think is a really great idea. I think especially with a coalition that has so many people in it, you need to have that. You know, I think it'll be really helpful to have you know, one place to go for all the information. We talked about discussing. We talked about further training in the program Undoing Racism, which I know that many of the administrators and members of the PTA have done over the past couple of years. So, you know, we talked about ways that we could expand that. And the next meeting will be in December. So I'm really happy to be a part of the coalition. I think it's really important. There's a lot of important work to do. Yeah, I'm just hoping that I think it's something that should be around for a long time, and just really become part of the fabric of our district. So it was a really positive meeting, really well run. I give Dr. Lloyd a lot of credit running. It was a well-run meeting. It's hard to do that on Zoom when you have so many participants. So so it was good, very positive.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there other committee reports? I'll just add that the facilities committee met, as also mentioned earlier in the evening during the presentation of the capital update, and we have another meeting next week to discuss the middle school and the high school long range planning. So is that it for committee reports? I see it. Go ahead. Okay. Dr. Pritchett, the meeting's running long, but I don't want to belittle the visit, but do you want to speak briefly on the state's visit to the district?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Obviously, this past week, we were paid a visit by Dr. Betty Rosa, who is the interim chancellor of, well, she's the interim commissioner, I should say. She was the chancellor. She's on loan from the Board of Regents, and she is serving as our interim commissioner. You know, I've been a superintendent now. I'm in my 11th year, and whenever I happen to run into a commissioner of education at an event like New York State School Boards Association convention, I always make a habit. I make an effort to go up to that individual and say, I'm Dr. Bob Pritchard. I'm the superintendent, and you need to come see what we're doing in our district, because, you know, you hear a lot of stuff around and not everything is positive, but, you know, we're going to make the positives so loud you won't hear the negatives. And I've never had a commissioner take me up on it until Betty Rosa came down. And she reached out to us and basically said, you know, she wanted to take a look at our hybrid model, which of course we're very proud of, as a, you know, to the exhaustion of all of us, our teachers especially, but I do think our kids are responding really well to it under the circumstances, and she was able to see that, and she was so impressed. I think the word she used was amazing. That she's invited Fran Wills, Regent Fran Wills, to pay a follow-up visit to us to see what we're doing. And I had just, you know, as wonderful as it was to see someone from state ed finally, and I give her a lot of credit for coming down to visit us, and I certainly am a great admirer of hers now because of that. I'd sort of put it out of my mind because, you know, we go from one project to the next around here. That's the sort of the flow here. But I did receive an email or a text message from a colleague who's a superintendent on Long Island, who mentioned that the commissioner was at the most recent statewide superintendent's convention. She had mentioned that she had paid us a visit here in South Orangetown, and that she learned a lot about how hybrid learning can work. So it was obviously very flattering to me as the superintendent here to hear from one of my colleagues on Long Island who had mentioned that the commissioner was basically commending us in front of our peers here in the state of New York. So I was really happy to hear that. It was obviously important for me as the superintendent, but I think it was also really nice for the teachers. I don't think the students knew who she was, but I think certainly the teachers felt very, very appreciated. Those who were able to meet Dr. Rosa, as I was encouraged. And I think you as board members should feel that way as well, because you certainly play a great role in our success as well. So thank you.
I'm going to say I think all the staff should, because I'll say the administrators provide the guidance, the leadership. The teachers are on the front line in the classrooms that I'll say quote unquote get it done. But none of it would happen without the support staff that goes behind it. You've got everybody that's part of facilities that makes sure the buildings, and the rooms are ready and available. You've got the clerical staff, the administration staff that all supports it. So, it's not one group that should be recognized. It's the entire district, as a collaborative effort is the team that was able to do what we're doing. So
I agree. No doubt, no argument for me. But I think we can all admit that it's Kathy Mascari who's really running the whole district. So and I just say that because she's sitting here and she's hurrying me along right now. So.
Well, I just want to acknowledge what Dr. Chauncey had said from BOCES about the technology and the amount of bandwidth. So I would like to say kudos to the district as well for making the decision to purchase what we need. There's sufficient bandwidth because there's some concerns from some of the other districts in the county, on bandwidth. So that was also mentioned. So I just wanted to call that out.
I think. Mrs. Lee, I think there were a lot of people that were very skeptical, but and I'll give credit to George Brady and his team, and also Mrs. Koster, who obviously put the resources behind that. But our technology folks, they timed it, so we weren't eating up a lot of, everything was synchronized. So we didn't hit that pipeline all at once. And that's just not George and his crew, but think about sort of the element of time and synchronizing that effort. We're talking about families, we're talking about teachers, we're talking about kids. That all has to work on a very large scale. Everybody has to be familiar with the concept of the operation and how to execute it. Because if everybody if we can't get it together on that scale, it shuts down. So everybody has to sort of take a turn, and you have to sip. You can't guzzle, and you have to hit your mark when you're supposed to hit your mark. Otherwise, you can chew up bandwidth really quickly. So it wasn't just a question of throwing money at it or putting in a tower or putting more gigabytes in place. It really was people working together to synchronize that effort to make it work. And that to me is truly the way that was scheduled in that execution to me was really impressive. So I echo your sentiments, Mrs. Lee.
All right. Are there any other board comments or committee reports? So moving forward to the consent agenda, there are 2 addendums to the consent agenda. I believe the board members received a copy of the addendums. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6 through 10 and the superintendent office consent addendums?
Motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I have a discussion though about 8C? I have some concerns about a 1.2 FTE. We talked before about burnout and marathons, and we're talking about 2 individuals now. I understand the need, but now they're being asked to do 1.2. So I don't support that.
Ms. Lee, when you say you don't support that, do you want to pull that item out?
I'm
Or
not gonna support it. So if you vote, everybody in favor, I'm not in favor of that.
okay, so if I have a vote for the consent agenda items 6 through 10, I've got Ms. Lee a nay. Are there any other nays? So I have the other board members as a yay. Okay. Ms. Lee, I hear your reservations and your concerns, and I would hope that Dr. Pritchard hears them, and that we make sure that, if there is a situation developing where there is burnout or, excessive stress, that the issue becomes, or assignment gets revisited. Is that fair, Dr. Pritchard?
That's fair enough.
Okay. Does that address some of your concerns, Ms. Lee? Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving forward under new business, do any of the board members have new business?
Yeah, so I just have one. I just want to reiterate an email that I sent out to you all from the Rockland County School Board regarding resolutions for the upcoming NYSBA convention. So if there's any questions that you have on the 19 that the committee supporting to move forward versus as well as the 8 that they are not supporting to recommend, just let me know, and I could take that back to the to the Rockland County School Board when they attend the convention. So,
And when do you need to know that by?
the convention is I think it starts. Ms. Muscari, it starts on the 20th. Is that correct?
No, 28th, I believe.
28th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but when do you need to take the information back to the Rockland County School Board?
Anytime before the convention, so that
Okay.
they know. They have a tabulation. I sent you the chart of
Yeah.
you know, what everybody had said, and pretty much everybody was in alignment except for a couple. So I think I provided all the information, but just
Okay.
let me know if you have any concerns.
All right, thank you. Is there any other new business? The only other item I have is our next school board meeting is supposed to be October 20th. It's a Tuesday evening. And it looks like I'll have a conflict on that evening. And I question whether we can move it to the Thursday, the 22nd.
So Mr. Jacobs, the original conflict was school boards convention, which was canceled, as well as my national conference, which is also canceled. So that was why we we typically wouldn't meet on a Tuesday. So it would be probably good to continue to be.
Okay, so if we can, if the other board members agree, then if we could look at the board calendar and make the notice for the 22nd instead of the 20th, I'd appreciate that.
I'm okay with the 22nd.
I'm okay with moving it.
Lonnie, I'll have to get back to you.
Okay, Dr. Stepani gave us a thumbs up, so it's okay. All right. All right, so if there's no other new business or any other board discussions? I see none. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:49 p.m.?
Make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. It was a long meeting, but I think we got a lot accomplished, a lot of information out there, good conversation, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.
You.
Thank
Good
you. Good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.